what I can remember is the June floods of 1986. June floods of 1986. And it rained for 13 days, non-stop, right? And there were several communities in Jamaica that were flooded out. But the parish that was affected in a very, very bad way was Clarendon. And the First Battalion was given the task to carry out the rescue and then relief work in the parish of Clarendon. It was not a good sight in that most of the area, especially in southern Clarendon, Milk River, Mitchell Town, Lionel Town, most of the areas were inundated, covered, and there was, they lost a lot of cattle and a lot of livestock. So it was not a pretty sight. But the First Battalion stood to its task and had things sorted out. As commanding officer, I thought that the battalion did extremely well, and I was told so.
There were quite a few memorable occurrences or occasions. The ones that come readily to mind are successful operational tours conducted in Kingston. A very successful Calypso Hop in 2007 where we did public duties. Calypso Hop was an exercise based on an exchange between the British Army and the Jamaica Defence Force. We're basically a company group from a unit within the British Army would come to Jamaica for 4 to 6 weeks to do training in our particular environment. And a similar figure from either 1 or 2 GR that was rotated on an annual basis would go to the UK and do training in their particular environment. 2007, however, the First Battalion went to the UK to do what is called public duties. That is, provide ceremonial guards for Her Majesty the Queen at Buckingham Palace, St James's Palace, Tower of London and Windsor Castle. An awesome experience. The troops performed exceedingly well, in addition to which we also had a composite band accompanying us, half regiment band, half military band. And in addition to being involved in the guard changes, they would also have band engagements in and around London whilst they were there. And that too was a resounding success.
In those days, gun violence started in the political arena. And that was a real battleground. That is when guns came into politics. And a state of emergency was declared. So we cordoned off the entire West Coast. And along with the police, we conducted house-to-house searches, searching for guns and ammunition. I think I had these great opportunities because I was in Bravo Company. My company commander was now deceased Colonel Barnes, who was just about, to me, the best commander I ever had. And what he did was, Bravo Company was assigned the role of doing the searches. So he divided the company in two, and he gave young Second Lieutenant Robinson, who was the next senior person in Bravo Company, half the company, and he took the other half. And we took it in turns. He would spend 48 hours there with one half and come back to camp, and I would go back out for 48 hours and come back to camp. So I had, every 2 days, I had 2 days back in the officers' mess. Most of the other officers, in fact all of the rest of them, couldn't enjoy that because they lived on the sidewalks. They were all of these most wanted men. And the moment the JDF or the battalion turned up at Denham Town Police Station, suddenly the police officers, the detectives and so on knew where all the people were who they wanted. But they would not go for them before. But now they had soldiers to go with them. And so they were just going out and picking up these people. I remember that probably the most wanted man was a man whose alias was Ratbat. Within days of that state of emergency, Ratbat was picked up.
I recall being a subaltern in Trenchtown, in Central Village, in East Kingston. I also had some very, very good moments commanding the troops of Alpha Company 1JR in East Kingston and also West Kingston, and having some really, really good successes. And what was most important to me with regard to all those successes, that not one of them resulted in any charge against a soldier or anything that they had to have sleepless nights, or I had to have sleepless nights about.
Every time that we deploy troops out in the operational area, our soldiers put their lives on the line. Personally, I have been involved in a number of confrontations with the criminal elements. In July 2001, it was a particularly bad confrontation down in West Kingston. And one of my soldiers, in fact, one of the soldiers that was very close to me during that operation was killed. Alright, and it was a particularly harsh confrontation between ourselves and heavily armed and well-numbered gunmen down in West Kingston. But our soldiers met the challenge. We did not back down, and I think over a very short time we brought control back to the situation. And any soldier that was involved, any policeman that was involved in that operation can be proud today that we stood our ground. We actually advanced on the enemy, and we took a professional approach to what we did.
I came back, and this now was my first Guard of Honor as ensign here. The visit of His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie. And I was in that fiasco at the airport when the Guard of Honor marched out of the airport, and there was this huge crowd on the waving gallery. And the chanting and the drumming. And there was a shower of rain just as the airplane sort of came into view. And so it circled. And when the rain stopped, the airplane landed to the chants of "Come down, God, come down, God." And when that airplane pulled up on the tarmac, all hell broke loose. The crowds of Rastafarians and so on jumped over the waving gallery. From the waving gallery upstairs, jumped down onto the tarmac, and they took over the airplane. They were just all over the place, and they lighted up their spliffs and their chillums, and they were smoking underneath the airplane. And the equerry, both to the Queen and to His Imperial Majesty, was a gentleman by the name of Major Trevor Robinson, who was also an uncle of mine. He was one of my father's youngest brothers. And so the steps went up to the plane, and he went up to introduce himself to the big boss, and the two of them appeared at the door. And when Haile Selassie saw the crowd, he turned around and went back into the airplane and said, "I'm not coming off of this airplane with that crowd out there." And the police, of course, who were totally outnumbered, just stood there. They just stood and watched. And at that point, the instructions were given to dismantle the Guard of Honor, fix bayonets, and the Guard of Honor took over the crowd control. And when they sort of made a cordon off area, the emperor came down, never took any salute. There was no guard of honor to take a salute from. And he got into his cars and he took off. And of course, to get back into Kingston was the other fiasco, because now there were thousands of people motoring back to Kingston. Anybody who thought they were going to the airport couldn't get there because the traffic was now, everybody was going in one direction. 5 lanes across if necessary. I mean, it was a total chaos. Anyway, we got back to Kingston eventually. It took hours. And then the rest of his visit went okay, to the point that that he did his tours through Kingston and so on. And then they came the departure from Montego Bay. Well, nobody was about to allow what happened at Norman Manley to happen again. So 1JR again probably had at least one company in Montego Bay. And just before daybreak on the morning of the departure, they took over the environs of Saxton Airport, and only those who were authorized could get in. So the Guard of Honor went through, and I was ensign again for the departure. But that went through quite well. The Emperor got on his airplane and he left, and the crowds were most upset that they could not get into the place. But that went through without a hitch. So that was my first 3 months back in 1JR.